Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at how you can handle a question and answer session using LiveToAirZ as a mechanism for that type of audience engagement where you want the audience to participate through asking questions, primarily by joining you on air or live as part of your hybrid production to ask these questions. And so we have a whole workflow set up for that, and we're going to go through that on today's show. So before we get there, though, I'd like to welcome everybody. And if you have any questions or comments, you can just post them below whatever channel you're watching us on, and we'll get to them here live. And if you'd like, you can also click on the link in the show notes and join us here live on air to discuss anything in more detail about what we're talking about today with questions and answers from remote guests. So probably to get started, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you first how this workflow would operate. And the key thing behind it is that we're going to use two channels in LiveToAirZ so we can pull in Zoom meeting guests that may have a question they want to ask as part of a meeting. We can pull one in one channel, get the other set dialed in, framed correctly, and then swap them out when we want. And so that's basically what we're going to cover, and we're using vMix to do this today. So let's take a look here at how this would work. So what I have here, let me switch this over so you can see. Sorry. So at the top, we have LiveToAirZ, and the bottom is a meeting, the feed that's going out. And this is just a host that's sitting there, and the host is waiting for questions. So the way this will operate is I can just take, say, Sean McGinnis here has a question. I just assign them to channel 1, and I can say, okay, bring them live. So now I slide them in the side, puts his name up, keeps it up there for about 6 seconds, then fades it off so you know who's asking the question. And while this question is being asked, I can then take and use channel 2 to get my next guest in. And you can see over here. And one of the things you'll notice I'm able to do, so let me switch over to the vMix screen over here and sort of show you what I'm doing here. So with this guest, I'm able to basically go in and adjust. I can zoom in on them. I can lower them in the frame and sort of move them over a little bit. I could even, make small gamma adjustments. And then when I'm ready, just by pressing the same button, I now switch them in, and same thing before. And then when I'm done, I can just click pause button, slide them off the screen. And so I can have a whole sequence where I have repeated guests asking questions, and I'm bringing it either in channel 1 or channel 2, whichever one is off air. And the system basically is prepping everything in advance, because you can see here, channel 1 now is the one that's prepped and ready to go. And so anything adjustment-wise, I can automatically do that, just like we did before, where I can just take the next guest and make any adjustments. So that's how we're going to handle this. But probably the interesting parts are going to be how we actually make this all work. But before I get into that, because we'll do that next, we have a few people that have been commenting. So Guy, great to see you, Guy. Thanks for joining us. So Bill Ashton, thank you, Bill. Always great to see you here. All right, thank you. Always appreciate you joining us, you. And Tom, great to have you here, Tom. Thank you. Okay, so to get started, what I'd like to first do is dig into how I've laid out everything in the vMix preset, and then we'll actually go into the automation components that I layer on top of this to make it all happen. So if we switch over here, it is not a very big, as you can see. So slide this over a little and see if we can get a little more here. This is really the extent of it. I have 13 inputs with everything. The way I have this set up, though, there are a few things that are important to keep in mind. So I have a input. This would be sort of my host camera input, and that's pretty standard. This is just a video looping, but it would probably be an NDI or an SDI feed coming in to bring that in. Then I start to take in the feeds from my Zoom meeting. So the way it works is I'm not taking in individuals, I'm taking in a channel, and then I assign individual participants in the meeting to a channel. So there's that first level there that we handle. So it's very easy for me to just change who's in a channel over in LiveToAirZ. So it works very straightforward that way. But the first thing I do, and we'll go into the rationale for all of this, the first thing I do is I take this and if I were to go in here, what I'm effectively doing in input number 3 right next to it is I have you can see the color bars here. That is my a PTZ preset. The reason I do this is because, as you saw when I was doing the demo, we are making adjustments to this input. And so we are doing things like zooming in and panning and, X and panning Y. I do not want to do that to my original source, because if I wanted to, do something with that source in another context, I wanted to have that untouched. So what I am doing is I am doing all those changes to the PTZ source. So we do the same thing here. We did this for channel 1 coming in from LiveToAirZ, and we do the exact same thing for channel 2 coming in from LiveToAirZ. Then we create a few mixes, and there's the second level reason for why we are doing these mixes. We are taking whichever one of these, the PTZs that are coming in, and we say, which one is live now? So if you remember, the last one that was live when I showed you was input 2, and that was this gentleman that we have over here. So he was the last one that was live. So if I wanted to cut a full screen to whoever was live here with the host asking a question, this mix has that. So I don't have to worry about switching to the correct channel. I simply know my full screen is always going to be mix, input 6, mix 2 here. And that allows me to do much simpler automation, because I don't have to keep as much status. I only have to know mix 6 is always going to be my full screen for whoever is asking the question. So that's the reason we set the first mix up as a second mix. Now we have 2 more mixes though. One is called the live mix, and the live mix, you can be doing stuff with that. So we sort of kept it. This is whoever is live. So it's pretty much a copy of this, but we have this here because you may want to do other things. So that's the live mix is mix 2. And we pretty much do the same thing. Whenever I switch that guest in, we switch them here into this mix. And then I have my review mix, and that is whoever is in the channel that is not on air. So this allows me to grab that PTZ, and I can then sort of layer that into my Twobox. Why do I do that? If I have this Twobox here, so let me sort of just switch over here so you can see this Twobox. If this were not the mix, when I do any types of adjustments and I sort of slide things around, that would slide that whole box around if this weren't coming in as a mix, if that was simply a layer that was in there. But because I set it as a mix, it does a flattening of that layer, and now only the person inside the box moves. And that's very important, because if you did this by putting in the original input directly, the PTZ out, the PTZ preset that we saved for either one of these, you would end up with something that's sliding around. So this gives you sort of that fixed 2-box positioning that you need inside of vMix to make this all happen. And then all we have here is the 2-box that you see here, and we have this 1 box that you see here, and then some background things, a lower third for the guest title, things of that sort. So it's a fairly straightforward set of things, but you just have to remember the rationale behind going from the original input source, which is coming from LiveToAirZ as NDI, into a preset, which sort of creates that level of isolation. So I make my adjustments to the preset, and then into a mix so that when I do a multi-box shot, the box stays fixed and only the guest inside that box is sliding around. So that's basically sort of the levels that are here in the preset. But the first thing to understand in terms of how we make these adjustments is we wanted to do something that you could do on your Stream Deck very, very simply. And we had done another show, maybe last season, maybe 2 seasons ago, don't remember, where I did the whole thing where you could actually take and read numbers off of the dials on a Stream Deck Plus and use those as sort of scalers that I could then apply to positioning a guest in a box. I wanted to do this in a very different way today, and a much simpler way, where I simply applied this directly using vMix shortcuts. So let me show you how I do that next here. And it is, again, something that it seems like a bigger deal when you describe it, but it's very simple to implement. So inside of our shortcuts, I have these 4 shortcuts that are set up for pan X, pan Y, zoom, and then I have the ability to adjust gamma, which we just put there as one more example of what you could do. So if I open up this shortcut, pretty simple. What I'm doing is I'm saying I want to take the function set pan X, which is one of these shortcuts that are available. And what I do here is I map it. When I do this find, I am mapping it to one of the dials. So if I click here and say find this on the keyboard, all I have to do is adjust this dial by turning it on the Stream Deck. And now you are getting that dial mapped to the adjustment. So when I say OK, then whatever I set, whenever I turn the dial, it's going to do a set pan X and just sort of adjust it from -1 to +1. So that's what we're doing here. But the way we make it work so that I can apply it to either what's coming in for channel 1 or channel 2 is that I'm using a dynamic input. And so in the scripting piece of this, which is where we'll sort of tie this all together, I am assigning based on whoever is in the preview window, because that's the one I want to adjust. I don't want to adjust somebody live on air. So when somebody comes in as another participant with a question, I can simply go, and once I've switched things around using my shortcuts and my scripting, I automatically know when I touch the knob to adjust pan X or pan Y, I'm working on whoever is in the preview channel right now to do that. So this is what we've done. We've done this for pan X, for pan Y, zoom, and for gamma adjustments. So that's sort of one thing to think about. And it makes this very, very simple. You can do this extremely easily. And you don't even need scripting beyond this. I mean, I could take and do this to any one of the inputs that I have and just use that directly. If I didn't want to do anything complicated, you can do that. I was just looking for a specific sort of workflow look and setting this together. So that's why I have the additional scripting for this. So next we'll dive into the scripting. So let me, before I do that though, let me see, do we have any? No, okay, we don't have any other comments here. So let's move forward and let me see if I can get this out of the way. Yeah, okay. So let's talk a bit about how we're doing things with the scripting. So I have here 3 main buttons that I'm using for. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Yeah, that may be easier to see. So I have 3 main buttons that I'm using. I initialize question time. And when I do that, I put everything into the correct slots that I want and have everything sort of preset to its initial start state. I then have something where I want to jump in and start taking questions, which is my live Q&A button. This button has different modes, and we'll go to that for like what state I'm in. Is there no guest and it's the first guest in? Is there a a guest there already, and I have to flip between them, which guest is in there. So we do all that in the second script. And the third is to pause question and answer. So if I have, I've gone through all the questionnaires for that segment, I can just click pause and it will slide back to just the host. So those are the three scripts that we're going to be working through today. So to initialize it, let's start to talk through what we're going to be doing here. So in initializing the question and answer segment, the first things I'm doing are I'm muting the audio. So each of these guests, they have isolated audio coming from LiveToAirZ. So we're going to mute audio for all of the guests as we do this initialization. And if we have an overlay up for like a previous guest or anything, and we go back and we initialize again, this will make sure that the overlays and all that are shut off. So now we have sort of a clean slate here. And then what I'm doing is I am going to switch over to a one-box question and answer. And that was the one box you saw where the host was sitting there and those sort of question marks were floating around behind him. That's what we're switching over to. So at that point, we switch to that. And then just by doing these API function calls, this is all very basic style scripting in this piece. I'm just going and saying, let's in mix 3. And if you remember, mix 3 is what's in sort of my preview. And understand vMix is 0 base. So when I go mix 3 in vMix, it'll be registered on the screen as mix 4, but it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. That's how. Technical detail, but that's why it says mix 3 here. So I'm putting remote guest 1 into mix 3, to mix 4. So that will get me the person I want to dial in first. And I am basically making sure that I can also see what was their original video. So I have one video and one box on this preview mix that is of the guest in their cropped box that they're going to be side by side from the host with. And then I also have the full screen. So if I'm starting to dial in and pan around this, I know what I'm looking at. I'm sort of doing this little window here on this bigger window on the side. And that gives me that ability to sort of see the bigger space as I'm dialing in specifically how I want that person set up. So that's all I'm doing. I'm basically going in here and saying, set this up on the side to give me the ability to dial in my first guest. And then on preview, I'm just putting this review box in. So this is giving me now everything I need to make sure everything is set up for my first guest. We skipped over this. And then this is what I mentioned. I set my dynamic input. Remember, that's how we're making these dials work, is that I'm setting a dynamic input and saying, when I adjust pan or just pan X or pan Y or zoom, do that on dynamic input 1. This is where I set that. And again, we said it's the first guest coming in because we're initializing. So we set channel 1 as the dynamic input. And we set the dynamic value, which we're using here in our scripting, as a way to keep track of what state are we in. And so in this, we can be in one of 3 states. Either we're initializing, which means I don't have any guest on the screen. So this is simply telling the system, when you do anything from this state, you have to bring that guest in. And we do that with a merge and slide the guest in on the side. We also have the active channel being 1, which means the guest coming from LiveToAirZ channel 1 is the one that's active. So that will mean that I would need to know that I'm switching in guest 2. So all of my all of my steps that I need to act on when I'm swapping guest is saying replace guest 1 with guest 2. And it's the exact opposite. If it says guest 2 is in there, it's a number 2, then I know I'm replacing guest 2 with guest 1, and I have to do all of that swapping. But that's what we do to initialize everything. And that just gets us to this simple initial state, which is the vMix host. So the Zoom meeting host sort of sitting there waiting for questions. Now, all of the interesting stuff starts to happen when I go to live. And let's see, if I can, why don't we just take a cut of the Stream Deck over here so you can sort of see how I have this piece set up as we're starting to dig into this. So just across the top, This is where I have init, this is where I have live, and that's where I have pause. So those are the three main buttons you have there. I also have a button over here on the side to reset the framing if I'm making adjustments. And down here across the bottom, this is my pan X on this knob, my pan Y, my zoom, and my gamma adjustment. So this is how I'm going to be controlling these. So when I want to, and so that you can, since you can see it in the background, if I click live now, where I have sitting here, you are now getting guest one. And you can see I had played around with the pan and the zoom, but now you see that guest one is in here and guest two is sitting over here. So that's how this is working mechanically. It's just simple buttons and knobs here, and that's controlling everything we need to do to bring these guests in. So let's jump back to the scripting. We'll look at this function now that we scripted here for going live with our guest. So we are basically starting out where we're saying what's the name of the active channel, so that way we can pull that out. And we initialize vMix because we're going to be reading dynamic values and dynamic inputs. So we have to load the XML model from vMix. So something we've done many times. And so all I'm doing here is I am getting the current LiveToAirZ channel. And so we're just pulling that out of here and putting that in as a string. So everything in dynamic values are strings. So you remember that. So we can work with that all here pretty simply. And once I pull that out, so that's that state. Is it 0? No guest is there. Is it 1? Channel 1 or 2, channel 2. So that's what we're looking at here. And we're doing this. Let me put on wrap here. Maybe that would make this a little easier. Give me a second. View word wrap. Okay, it's on. So, okay. So what we're doing here is we're using something called a select case. All this says is based on whatever value we just read from this dynamic value, if it's 0, it's case 0. If we're reading a string 0, do these functions. If we're reading a case 1, do these functions. So we're just breaking it up, and it's a very simple way to handle this. But all we're doing in this is, again, all shortcuts for the most part, outside of this select case statement. Everything we're doing is just a series of shortcuts to do what we want to do. So if there's nobody there, we're turning the overlay off, and we're basically getting everything set. So we're cutting in remote guest 1 as our to our live mix and to our single box mix. So if we want to switch to that, and we are setting up our preview mix for remote guest 2 because we're going to do that and get all that set. We are selecting the data source because we want to put a name up. So we actually have data sources. We've mapped the data out of LiveToAirZ that it was pulling from the Zoom meeting, so we know the guest names. So we're selecting the proper data source row for the guest, the first guest. And then we're going in and we're saying, let's set the dynamic inputs. Again, because we now have to swap things around. So the preview guest, we're going to be LiveToAirZ channel 2, and we're setting it up with that channel 1 is now the active one, and the dynamic input is the preview one. That's how we have this set up. So whenever I touch those knobs, it just uses whatever is in that dynamic input. So now with all that set, we turn the audio on for channel 1. We turn the audio off for channel 2 to make sure that we don't have one guest talking over the other. We do the preview input with the Twobox Q&A, which is now all set. And then I do the merge. And that slides that first guest to ask the question in on the side. And then we're just setting up everything to make sure the review box looks right. So that's the thing where I said you have the full input, full 16:9, and then the cropped one to work with. That's all we're doing here. So that's just setting all of that up. And then we turn on the overlay, which we have set up as overlay input number 2. And that actually puts the username up there, and the overlay itself will come off in about 5 seconds. So it sort of puts up the user's, the questioner's name, and then pulls that down after it's been up for a little bit. So that is our sort of initial state. So that's when we see just the host and then that first guest slides in. After that, we're doing a lot of things that are very, very similar. So we don't have to go over it in great detail. But what we're doing here when it's case one, that means if if LiveToAirZ channel one is coming in with the participant that's talking there and asking a question, then we just use a cube thing to rotate the next guest in. So we're setting everything up effectively the same way. Turn all the inputs off, get everything prepped for what we want in mix 2, mix 1 and mix 3, which are our live and our preview and our full screen mixes that we have set up, selecting the correct data source. And again, all of these things are up in our download section in the link in the show notes, so you can download all of this. But so effectively, we are just taking and prepping this in reverse. We were first putting in guest 1, and now we're putting in guest 2 and getting all of that set. So you can go through this. We don't have to dig into it here. But everything that we wanted to get done here is basically just based on state. So you can see it becomes very easy. I'm pressing the same live, like next question, next question, next question. And you don't have to do a lot from a workflow point of view because you're basically setting everything up using these mixes to get everything in the right thing and using the dynamic value and the dynamic input values that are stored. And we're using that to drive this entire process of a Q&A session. And we do that for case 1 and case 2. And then when we're done, and because we're not doing a slide in or merge or anything, we're just flipping from one guest to the next and doing the audio on and off to make sure the right guest is muted and the right guest is unmuted. And that's what we do here. So you can go through all this, but it's not a great code challenge for this. It's really that select case and then a bunch of shortcuts framed in sequence to do all of this. So hopefully that makes sense. We do have the pause, which I mentioned, and that's the last one, which it sort of puts us back to that initial state, but it sort of merges the guest off the screen back to the solo host that's talking and resets all the channels and effectively does exactly what you saw on Init, just with a few subtle variations to exit the guest instead of bring them on like we do the first time when they're live. So that's there. The other script that we have is basically just has me reset the framing for whichever guest is in the preview. That's dynamic 1. We've talked about that. So why would I have to do that? Maybe if we switch back to Zoom here, to the vMix screen here, I can go through this and you'd see. So say I have this channel here and this is all set up. And let me see if I go over here and I want to replace this. So if I want Edward Smith to go in this channel and I want to replace it, this is channel 2. Yeah, I think it's channel 2. So you can see now that he's framed totally wrong. So by pressing the reset framing button, this will just let me go back and start from scratch. So I can turn around and say, okay, now for him, I want to move him a little bit. And maybe I just want to zoom him in a bit and push him down a little bit, give him a little more headroom. So now I can do that. And then when I switch him in, that's fine. And I can look here now and do the same thing. I have this here and it's totally incorrectly framed. So just by resetting that, it pops that in. So it gives me a simple way when I bring in my next guest. So let's see, we got Becca here and I'm replacing channel 1 now. So put Becca in. I have all that information now. And again, same sort of thing. I could dial Becca in. She needs to go a little bit zoomed in. She's sort of far away and put her down. Put over there and down. So, I mean, the other thing is I said you have gamma, so you could I could try to lighten it or darken it a little bit. So that gives you a little more control that way. So this is sort of, I can dial in a guest and then I can just go and reset them. Each one that's asking a question. And it's participants, or I guess is a wrong term because these are the people that are participating in a meeting and want to ask questions. So that's how we have this all set up. So hopefully this all is useful. This is something you can use. I know that for a lot of folks that are doing virtual events and hybrid events, they really want to create that sort of engagement around questions, especially because that sort of builds momentum for how a production is going to move forward. If you have a panel, the ability to ask that panel questions from the people who are listening to them debate an issue or talk about something is really, I think, a critical interest element to most of the production. So having a nice, simple way to do this where you can have a host taking in questions and flipping between questions, that's very much like in a live event where they'd have a mic at the end of an aisle. And, people would line up behind the mic and each one would get a chance to ask a question. This gives that same capability now to an audience where having channel 1 and channel 2, that's your line. And you just sort of, everybody that's there waiting to ask a question, you're just assigning the next one to the open channel and letting them go. So hopefully this works pretty well for the types of productions you're doing. All of the assets, as I mentioned, are up on our Google Drive, so you'll be able to download all of that, the vMix session, as well as the scripts. So that all should be there for you. So let's see. We have a few more questions, but why don't a few more comments. So why don't William, thank you. I appreciate you joining. But I'm thinking, why don't we switch over to our post show and we can dig into this in a little more detail, whatever you'd like to cover there, and we'll go through any other questions and any other comments or thoughts you have. So as a normal, I will be doing my next show in 2 weeks. That I believe is May 23rd. I think I have written down here. So that will, that'll be 2 weeks from today. If you can't join for the post show, love to see you then. If not, I'll see you in a minute and we'll get back to our comments and questions. All right, welcome back to our post show. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me here. Spatial, hi there. Thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that spends time with us. So thank you for shouting out in hello. I like to see that. Thank you. So we have Bill Ashton Nilo. Bill, always good to hear from you, and I do appreciate the comments and everything that. You've been, pretty consistent with making. That's we're trying to dial in what we do here on Streaming Alchemy. It's sort of always a continuous work in progress. So I appreciate the support. Thanks, Bill. So Aziz, good to see you, Aziz. Yeah. So if you do have any questions, I mean, we covered stuff right at the end, but if you do have any questions, just pipe in and we'll try to cover them here as well if there's anything else. So thanks, Bill. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is something that is applicable. I mean, one of the things that I got as feedback from people from a lot of what we've done over the past several seasons is that the scripting is interesting in the abstract, but it isn't as applicable to, the way people are going to build their sessions and workflows. So what I'm trying to focus on a bit more this season, it won't be absolute, but I'm trying to focus a bit more on making the scripting much more around using some simple core, like visual basic .NET elements, but for the most part, packaging that with shortcuts so that it is something that you could sort of take as a template and then start to work with without feeling you need to be a programmer and have that sort of skill set. So I just wanted to, that's why you're seeing that sort of change in some of the stuff we're doing. There may be some cases where I'm just going to be doing more complex things because that's the nature of it. But by and large, that's what we're trying to do now. So, Michael, good to see you here. Always nice to have you join us. So working hard on getting everything ready for a football game tomorrow. Oh, yes. So this is it's interesting because I don't think everyone, appreciates the amount of prep work that goes into putting a production together, even a very simple one. So, yeah, it's especially sports because that's less scripted and much more dynamic. So everything you have to do, not sure that would be something I could actually do production on. That was probably a little bit too complex a workflow for me to participate in directly. Though I probably wouldn't mind, building sessions for things like that. So, thanks, Michael. Bill, thank you. So, Wayne. So this is from Queensland, Australia. So yes, this is. I do not know why you were up. So I'm assuming it was either a long Friday night. So I'm sort of giving you that benefit as opposed to an early Saturday morning. But you can pick which one you want to use to describe it. So thank you. So Aziz is asking, tell us about where you guys are, how big your company is, and what's your background. Okay. So we're in New Jersey in the United States. We're just outside of Trenton, New Jersey, the capital. Our company is relatively small. We are sort of like based on what we have going on and, where we have, outside contractors or other things. We are somewhere, always below 10, somewhere, between 5, 6 sort of on average. So we're not a huge company. My background, I am an engineer sort of by schooling. I studied engineering in university and, got my degree in that. I went into programming sort of in my last year of college because I'm old enough where computer science was not a major when I entered college. So I was an electrical engineer for 3 years and then a computer science major for my last year. And I actually went into basically small venture companies that did intelligent processing and categorization of information. We focused on the financial markets about 13, 14 years ago. I decided I wanted to do something completely different. Always loved video, always loved working in this space. So I went and started a company, and we developed a set of products for remote guests. So that was LiveToAir, and now LiveToAirZ, which is our newest product. So that's sort of the thumbnail sketch of who we are, where I came from, and what we're doing now. So Michael's saying he uses a lot of scripting. Some of the stuff from here. So just double check my work there, Michael, because a lot of this stuff is put together sort of quickly for demonstration purposes. But and he uses a lot of Companion. So yeah, I think between Companion as the sort of the button control automation and everything you would do with scripting, you have some incredible automation capabilities available to you. So I think what you can do with vMix is incredible, and having all these other elements tied in is just makes it much simpler on a workflow basis. So yeah, Aziz, I mean, he was asking about the coding side, and yeah, I did a lot of coding when I started, but to be fully transparent, though I understand coding, I have not been a professional coder for over 20 years. So, and for me, I've been sort of that engineering mindset is sort of what drives me. So I like to take a problem and break it down into how would you solve this problem using these tools. And so I enjoy doing that. I first had that through code, but then you start to, look at problems at that more macro level where you're saying, What I'm really trying to do is organize the problem into solvable bits. And then I let people who are much smarter than me go and sort of solve the solvable bits, and then we stitch it back together into useful things. And that's what I love doing. And so that's sort of what you see here on Streaming Alchemy. So Junge, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you making the time to join us live here on the show and for watching. I mean, it's a real blessing to have people that are passionate enough about this this area to to join us here. So thank you. All right. So I don't know if everybody saw the note that I left on the YouTube in the sort of the community section where you can post comments. But we are working on some new things, and we're sort of refocusing the channel around, I'll say, around remote guests and how you integrate those into productions. But that is a pretty broad space, and what we're trying to do is align, what we do on the neural net side and the product side with what we're doing more on the show, but still covering, for the most part, the same core things that we've done. We're doing scripting, we're doing vMix presets and sessions. We're going to end up having graphic elements. We're going to be looking at other tools that you can use, reading metadata, all the stuff that we've sort of covered traditionally. We're just going to take a slightly different angle to doing it. And we're also looking at doing some things slightly differently in how we're organizing our shows and how often we're going to do things. And so we're looking at potentially integrating more pre-recorded shows into what we do. That way I can be sort of live, so to speak, or at least be posting on a more consistent basis than I'm doing now with the every other week. And I think it may also make some of the content we do more accessible to a broader audience, because I'm able to sort of edit that down, and it won't have the same level of interaction that we'd have in the live shows, but it will be more direct and to the point for people that are trying to use it as reference information. So we're still working through all of the, logistics, both from a workflow, what I do with the company, as well as, just how we want to sort of produce, content for the channel generally. So we got a few more months of work ahead of us in getting that sorted. But I'll share all of that with you as soon as we sort of lock in what we want to do. And I always welcome feedback for tuning in to make sure we're doing the right stuff. So I just wanted to share that. Oh, so Aziz is asking what I would want to see in the new vMix update. That's a hard one. I think a lot of the stuff inside of vMix, if I were to break it down into where I think you could get a lot of power out of vMix, I think it's the way they handle scripting. Even though scripting itself is incredibly powerful inside of vMix, I can't create things like functions or build libraries of these tools. I can create scripts, and sort of I can then have that full script execute, but I can't write a script which has different sub-functions in it and call those functions based on logic or anything like that. I basically just have to write one long piece of code, and I can't always manage that as well as if I could sort of build libraries, include things, and just sort of do that. Now, could sort of make it work, but I'd really love to see that aspect of vMix and sort of updating to a later version of VB.net, so that's sort of the geeky side in terms of features. I'd love to see that. I really am not, there's no specific things that I feel like I'm missing in vMix, though there are certainly things that you could see them doing better. Would love more things in virtual sets in vMix. I always like the way that the folks at Nutex now, VizRT, have their virtual set functionality inside of the TriCaster. And they're subtle things, but they are really very powerful things. So for instance, they have this thing where You have parallax. So if I want to do a move between sort of a camera move and a virtual set, it actually can move the different planes, the background plane from the guest plane from the foreground plane. It can move those at different speeds as you move a camera or things like that. So it can make it look more realistic. So subtle little things, but definitely really cool stuff. So I don't really have a good list, but I mean, if you guys have stuff that please share it, because there may be something on here that really resonates. Oh, yeah, I should have thought of that, and we'll maybe put that up and try to support any efforts that we can with vMix to add those to. Gosh, what's it going to be now? Is it 29 or 30? I can't even remember. Yeah, we're going to be 29 is the next one. So it's a lot of versions have gone by over these years. So yeah, so please everybody share it. That would be something. Even if it's not live here, just share it in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys think. Great question, Aziz. Thanks. Love to see a video showcasing a vMix rig setup. Yeah, I could probably post something that would reflect at least some of the stuff that we have here. But there are probably other people that are doing more portable rigs, things that they're using for remote live productions and the like. So if you'd like, again, post links in the show notes if you have that up, and I'll try to promote the setups that you have and see if you can get any feedback on those. Because I mean, for us, we're set up for an odd type of scenario. We are using this to do shows, but we're also demoing with it. So I'm not actually switching my show here. I'm using a vMix setup here that is for demonstration purposes, and we have another vMix station that we're actually switching the show at. So, for here, I have just, tons of screens because, I got comments, I got, like in this case, Zoom and LiveToAirZ. I have a virtual Visual Studio Code. I have vMix running. And then I have a second system on the side, which has like all the Zoom guests that are coming in that we use for the demo. So a lot of what I do here is specific around demos, but for our live setup, I definitely could put a video together and sort of give you behind the scenes at how that is all hooked up and working. So, yeah. So how would you do a poll in sports about which team might win? Okay, there's a few ways to do this. None of them are straightforward right now. But we did something with polling. If you look back, oh my gosh, let me see if I can find it. We did something specifically with polls that had a whole graphical interface and everything. Let me see if I can open up something here. I just have too many windows here. But let me see if I can, because it actually went into a lot of detail for this. And the way it was working is you were taking in, people in comments could post like yes or no, or, you could do it, other ways. And what it was doing is it was reading the comments out of vMix Social, so that those things change. And so it was reading those comments, aggregating and counting how many people said yes, how many people said no. And we actually had a whole, let me see, just too many different things. I won't be able to, to pull it up easily. But if you look back on previous shows we did, I have that. And I believe that was something that was run in Node.js, actually, because it was a little more complicated. But there are different ways. And so the simplest way would probably be do something as like everybody that wants, team A, type A, team B, type B. And then you would have something reading that from what's coming in through your vMix, through vMix Social. So basically you're pushing all of these comments that come in directly out to an input in vMix and using a script that just runs in the background and counts all those. So that would be like high level. That's how it would work. And then you could take that and do things with it. We are looking at some stuff that we could do in the future for this. We have some things in LiveToAir and some things planned in LiveToAirZ that will help with some of these things, but that's not something that we have now. So we understand the complexity. So hopefully, in the next 6 months or a year, we'll have a good, simpler solution for you. All right. So what else do we have? All right. All right. So let's, I guess that's probably everything that we have here now that I wanted to go over. If you have any more questions, just get them in. As I mentioned, though, we will be doing our next show in 2 weeks. So you have to look in May 23rd. So it'll be Friday, May 23rd. And again, we'll be covering another show in this general topical area around virtual events, remote guests, all of that. So hopefully we will cover things you're interested in. If you have other suggestions that, for stuff in that genre, that vein of production that you're interested, just share them with me. I'd love to hear it. So until then, in 2 weeks, for everybody, thank you for joining. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you then. Take care.